Alright, time to go through the final part of the second wave of Hammond collection figures. The Triceratops has arrived. Not gonna lie, not as excited for the trike as I was for a lot of the other ones in the figures, but this line of figures, but the second wave had a lot of competition. I do like the trike as a species, of course. Who wouldn't like a trike as a species? But yeah, between like my relatively newfound love for Ceratosaurus from Jurassic World Evolution 1, and I've always loved Gallimimus just because, you know, big ol' pack animal's fun. And of course the classic Rex. It's just like a lot of stuff for it to compete with. So let's get this popped open. Check out this guy for, I don't know, sculpt, paint, accuracy, the usual stuff we babble on about. But there it is. There's a trike. I have, again, of course, prepared a few images for, well, comparison. And that is a short tail, which is, you know, pretty reasonable for both a trike and a Ceratops in general, a JP trike and a Ceratops in general. So tail is kind of actually weird here. So this tail, hard plastic, and then it's got this short, softer section here, which actually does seem like it has a wire in it, but there's almost no actual posability you can do with this. It's just a softish nub, which is a little weird to me, but okay. Also, the tail, like, on its own is really hard to get any sense of, like, orientation from. I think that's right. Yeah, you can see the osteoderms across the top here connect to the pattern there. Slightly twisted when I unpackaged it. I'll have to free this Triceratops from its binds. Give me a small sort of cutting device. Let's liberate this poor defenseless animal from its confines. It's probably easier to just snip them in the back than to try and snip them from the front. Also try and not end up with 1,000 little ties on my floor, which so far has been a little bit of a ordeal in a sense of just finding these random little plastic pieces all over occasionally. I'm literally trying to like keep them from going everywhere, but they just kind of have a tendency to go flying or fall off a table or something in the process of making the video. I think she's loose. Let's get this thing out. Yes, she is free. Okay. Well, as always, step one, attach tail. Or look at figure first before attach tail, I guess, because that's what I'm actually doing. I could not stop myself. She's got nice detail on her. A lot of like osteoderms or large scales, not just on the back, but also on the legs and both the fore and the rear legs. Eyes kind of an orange color. A lot of details on the horns. They look a lot nicer in person than I kind of thought initially looking at them online, where I thought they looked a little maybe over detailed, but they look pretty good here. Also, the color palette is a lot bluer than I was expecting from some of the images, which is fantastic. They actually have like browner feet with that kind of like dusting, because the trike, we'll get to this when we go to some comparison images, the trike is not brown in Jurassic Park. It's more of a blue-gray, which it's very nice to see that the figure is more blue-gray than brown. The brown is just dirt that was layered upon the animatronic to make it look more realistic. And I actually think this figure does a surprisingly good job of capturing that aesthetic, since the feet are highlighted in brown in particular, and then brown across like the back and the thighs, the front of the legs, and then across the frill, but not just flat brown. It's like the gaps in the frill are more that blue-gray than the brown. Yeah, that's better than I was thinking it was going to be. Oh, also an addendum about the Ceratosaurus video. I was able to get the Ceratosaurus to stand properly without an awkward posture. I just had to apply a little more force to loosen up the thighs, and they slide forward, just like every other figure. So that original criticism is now no longer valid. They were just a little stiff. In terms of paint detailing, paint looks pretty good. No like real issues that I see. If I'm going to be really nitpicking things like the horn, the nasal horn, the line of darker paint before the lighter paint of the rest of the horn is pretty sharp. That's not true for the brow horns, which have a much more natural progression of colorization, starting dark at the bottom and lightening up pretty quickly. Whereas the nose horn definitely looks like a toy. The beak, the lower beak on this side, they probably, I don't know if you can even see that. There's a very slight, maybe arguably slight misalignment of the paint, where like the layer of skin that seems like it overlaps the beak has a little bit of the beak paint on it. A very tiny amount. Like you're not going to notice it from a distance. This is really nitpicking paint job stuff. So this one's pretty good. The jugal horns on the crest, I believe that's what they're called, are painted, which is nice. That's a little bit more paint than you might have hoped. The toenails are not, but since the feet are painted brown, that's kind of okay because they're covered in that dust. If it was going for like a, or at least should be covered in that dust. If it was going for a true like clean trike look, instead of having the reddish brown dirt on it, those nails should probably be painted. It'd be more of an issue if they weren't. This is an interesting detail. So when I was preparing for the video, excuse me, I gotta sneeze. It's not coming. All right, I'll sneeze again later. When I was preparing for the video, I noticed one detail on the trike, or read a discussion about one detail with the trike about the wait, what are the little horns on the side? Are those the, yeah, parietals and the jugals, right? So the jugal horn for the trike is kind of this weird little double horn, actually on the figure. Inaccurate to the real animal, a Jurassic Parkism pretty much, but there are two tiny little horns there on the side of the face. They're unpainted, but the fact that they're there at all is impressive. I'm really curious about the accuracy of the horns looking straight ahead. They look like they curve a lot inward. And I'm not sure if that's accurate or inaccurate. I do not know. Oh, this is also a little weird. If you look at the feet, the lower legs and the upper legs, there is like a noticeable difference in color where the upper legs and the feet have that layer of brown over the top for like dirt, but then the lower leg is just possibly unpainted. I think it's unpainted. The middle section of the leg here appears to be unpainted base color, whereas the upper section and the lower section have that additional paint layer. It actually is a bit noticeable, especially from the front, where you can really see that difference in contrast, where the middle section is stands out from the other two. Kind of strange. Tail appears to be unpainted too. Not as noticeable because there isn't like brown right on the connecting point here on the ass of the toy, so it's not as bad. Yeah, let's look at some comparison images maybe. Let's see here. Let me pull up my stuff. Yes, so there's kind of a, I think, a behind the scenes shot of the trike, sort of. I gotta make sure we're not covering details here in the OBS recording. Slide this over a little bit. You can see the blue gray that comes through here. Eye actually does look a bit orange, so the eye color looks pretty good. And actually, if you look at the trike, her feet are actually rather dirty. So actually the claws, you don't actually see the color of those very much in the film. They're really covered in this reddish dirt she's laying on. Then you can see it streaked across the back there. And yeah, you can see it on the frill. It's actually interesting. If you look at the toy, like the dirt looks like it's on the raised parts of the frill. Like the dirt is here and here. But if you look at the animatronic, it looks like the opposite is true, where the dirt is in the crevices of the frill, like here and here. And the raised parts are actually the bluer parts. So the toy is kind of inverted in that regard, which is interesting. Yeah, I think the horns are inaccurate. If you look at the horns on the trike, they look like they splay out pretty strongly. It looks like they're not nearly so like straightforward as these ones are. Like they should, I think they should splay out a little bit wider here. At least as wide, probably a little bit wider than the crest, maybe. Certainly not a deal breaker, not that bad or anything. What else is going on with you? The film trike, I don't know if it's a quirk of the positioning, but it really looks to me like the frill's a little shallower on the film trike. It's hard to say because it's always just, on the ground. And the head feels a little longer. Maybe just a tiny bit longer. Hard to say, very hard to say. You can see the large scoots, or whatever you want to call them, the bigger scales on the side of the animal here. Oh, you can also see kind of the lighter patterning here on the nose and around the eye a little bit, which is on the figure. It looked much more noticeable in like the pre-release shots. In fact, on this side, it's like barely noticeable at all, that lighter patterning. On this side, you can see it a bit here, like especially in front of the eye. But yeah, I like that it's more subtly blended in. It looked like it really stood out on the pre-release. You could see it on the shoulders too, where there's this little bit of lighter patterning. There it really stands out to me. And also not sure it's that justified being there. Hard to tell. Hard to tell. It's really hard to get a good shot of the animatronic, so. What other comparison images have we prepared? Here's another behind the scenes shot. This one's a little bit lower quality, but I like this one because you actually kind of see some of the other paint detail here without any of the dirt. The dirt was added in the field during filming. So it actually looks like you can see that there's actually a lot of like kind of speckled patterning on the hind leg here maybe. And underneath the tail and the belly kind of has this lighter coloring, which isn't really on the figure. And that's not something I'm going to hold against it. Just an interesting curiosity. Seeing the actual clean trike. Let's see. Other comparison shots. There's a face shot. Looking a little closer. Can't see the eye color too good. There you can see the double horns. The double jugal horn or whatever. That's a weird JP-ism. They probably should stick out more in the sculpt of the figure, where they're rather flat to the skull, but that's understandable, for toys being toys. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine. 9 horns on a side for the frill looks reasonable. That's really getting into like nitpicking details, but it's a curiosity. It's something to consider and think about. You got some nice wrinkling by the beak here, which you can see on the actual animatronic here. So that's a nice attention to detail on the lower mouth there. It's really weird that there's such a seam coming off the mouth on this figure. Not sure why that's there. This line beneath the eye here, going from the jaw to under the frill. There really shouldn't be a line like right in the middle. Like under the eye, it should just be continuous, scaling here, continuous flesh. You can see that here. This line, there's just this ridge, but the ridge doesn't stand out that much. So there really shouldn't be a line here on the figure. Again, nitpicking details. If I'm looking at the trike and kind of the profile, yeah, if you're, how can I rotate this to the camera? If you're looking at the trike, she'd be kind of laying down in this image, approximately, kind of with her head to the side. those horns do seem like they're a little too curved inward. Like, essentially, it feels like it should be coming up a bit more. Hard to get an exact comparison, though. And then we got the feet. A little bit of trike feet. These feet are horribly inaccurate in the context of the film. Since they're based basically off like elephant feet and not, actual ceratopsian feet. If we look at the figure, I mean, yeah, the feet look like that, basically. These nails are pretty well embedded. The figure actually has much more defined toes, which actually makes it probably a more accurate Triceratops. That's interesting. Yeah, because the film one, it's really just claws popping out of a elephant foot, a pad of flesh. And they really should have, as I understand it, much more defined toes. So that's kind of in line with me talking about the fingers on the T-Rex, where the two fingers were not the same length on the Hammond Collection Rex. They were different lengths, which was more realistic to the actual T-Rex than it was to the Jurassic Park T-Rex. I think, again, the digits on the trike are much the same. I'm, again, fine with that. You don't get a terribly good look at the feet in the film. And I'm okay with them being a little more accurate. Yeah. So that's about it for comparison images that I have to the film. There's not so many good images to get of the trike to see like detail in different ways. We can also compare to the Kenner trike, which is, this is the JP Series 1 film, original film trike, which is a good deal larger than this trike. The Hammond Collection one's probably a bit small. I mean, it is a bit small. Absolutely. Because if you have a little man figure, like our little friend Alan Grant here, Alan Grant should be able to lay on the belly of the trike and, have a religious experience. And he's much more scaled correctly, I think, to this one. This one's maybe a little big, but if you compare it to, like, the Hammond trike, like, Grant can barely get in between those legs, much less lay on the belly decently. So, yeah, this one's definitely a little small, which is disappointing. That's been a problem with trike in, like, a lot of the lines. There was a really cool design for a JP Lost World trike that was never released, which looked like the trike figure. It looked phenomenal. And so the only trike we got for the Kenner Lost World line was the small baby trike. I'm believing like this is like the only large trike out of like even the Mattel line. I don't think has a good sized trike. Like still, even with this figure. Because the base trike that they have, I think, is actually a little bit smaller than this one even. So there's not a good big size trike. We can still make some comparisons though. You can see that like the Kenner one does have the scoots on the back again, and it's got this blue-green color palette that's probably drawing inspiration from the blue-gray of the animatronic, but it's a little more exaggerated and lighter colored. And then yeah. Honestly, the horns on the Kenner trike suffer from basically like the same discussion I would have about if they're a little too confined, a little too narrow. That they don't splay out as wide as they should maybe. Which is interesting. It's surprising that both would appear to have the same issue. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the trike's horns actually do look more like that. And the film is just the angles it's shot at make it look like they spread out more. Don't know. And yeah, you can see the lack of defined toes on the Kenner trike is probably more in line with the film animatronic, which makes sense. This is probably based. I mean, some of the like the Kenner figures, at least the Rexes, are based partially at least off the maquettes for the film itself. So they're drawn much more closely to those designs, whereas obviously Mattel's got to recreate designs that are 30 years old? Good God, that's so old. I'm so old. You're very dusty, Triceratops. What have I haven't been cleaning you. Oh God, dust everywhere. The frill detail is an interesting comparison. Like the Kenner one's way too flat in the frill, and it's got all these other little bumps on there that are, I think, pretty much an invention of Kenner. But yeah, definitely the scaling's better for that one. They're not so different that you couldn't like have them together. Sometimes the Kenner designs don't mesh well with later designs, or in the case of like the baryonyx with themselves, like the Lost World baryonyx compared to the JP1 baryonyx are pretty different looking dinos. But yeah, we gotta decide where to rank this trike, I guess. I think the biggest disappointment to me is the scale. This was a great opportunity for a larger trike figure, and we don't get it. We just get the same kind of undersized trike we've been getting for basically every toy line since the original, which is a bit disappointing. It's actually pretty interesting posability. The hip here actually has like kind of a ratchet to it a little bit. It seems like maybe where it kind of pops to certain spots. Maybe not. Maybe it's just more the molding doesn't allow it to move as much, the rear leg. But we could still do a little bit of different posing with it. It does move in and out. I didn't talk too much about the articulation, but yeah, the legs do have some in and out movement. It's actually not that much. Unless, again, it's a case like with the Cerato where I just really need to force it a little bit more. The Cerato was a case of, like, thinking back later, and I'm like, that leg has to move out more. There's no way they'd release a figure where the leg only goes forward that much in this line. It's, like, entirely counter to the whole point. And lo, that was a correct assumption to make. That I was mistaken, not the figure. Yeah, I don't know. This one's a little bit of a hard one for me to place. I think... I mean, it's certainly a good figure. I think what I'm going to do with the scaling being a little low... I think it has to go above the galley, because the galley is very inaccurate to the film Gallimimus that it claims to be. But it is a good figure. Whereas the trike is fairly accurate, but it's got other little issues, like sizing. I don't know. Should the trike be... I don't feel like I can put the trike in S tier because of the sizing. I think it goes at the very tippy top of A. I think that's correct. Also, you can't open the beak on this. This is all solid plastic here. And given that the trike... One of the notable scenes is somebody sticking their fingers in its mouth. The fact that you can't open its beak is kind of weird. It doesn't feel like it would have been that hard to like add articulation to the beak. At least just to open the lower jaw. I mean, they have like openable jaws on the Apatosaurus figure, which absolutely does not need it, and it looks awful. So like... I feel like it's a missed opportunity. The trike would have worked. Its beak, I think, is big enough for it to be a pretty decent little hinge point. Yeah, it's actually rather static compared to a lot of the other Hammond collection figures. You've got the elbow joints and the ankle joints in both the fore and the rear limbs. You've got the head that can move around a bit, but there's not that much posability to this figure compared to the rest of the line. It's actually pretty limited. Like, the tail rotates... Both these sections rotate and swivel on this ball joint a little bit. But there's not much you can do with it because the back length is the only part that has the wire in it, if there's even a wire in there. So there's like no actual real posability. It's just put it to the side or put it to the side. Or down a little bit more, up a little bit more. And it doesn't really look good if you start posing the tail. It looks really rigid and segmented. So yeah, I think that's another reason to knock this figure a few points, if I'm being honest. I don't think it lives up to the posability of anything else in the line. So yeah, I think top of A. Top of A. Decent accuracy, scaling's bad, limited posability. relative to the rest of the line. Which, I mean, theropods are easier to pose, I guess, because they're not... because they're standing on 2 feet. You can move the arms around independently of whatever has to balance the figure. A quadruped, it's a lot harder to do with. This is also the first quadrupedal figure we've had in both the Hammond collection and Amber collection lines, which is surprising. I really hope to see more. I'd love a Lost World Stegosaurus. I'd love to see a JP3 Anki. I'd love to see... I mean, I'd love to see everything. I'd love to see a Sinoceratops, too. A lot of people hate the Sino. I always liked it. I don't know. Nasuda would be cool, especially if we get female and male. That'd be a great 2-piece to display. But yeah. Well, I think I've said about all I have. I think this feels correct for tier placement, I think. Top of A. Yeah.